Laura Millar, 2025 Carrie Buck Distinguished Fellow.
When we give people the language of ableism, when we explain what it is on both sides for the disabled person to understand and for the non-disabled person to understand, then we can have a healthier, safer society.
Carrie Buck Distinguished Fellowship, a black and white photo of Carrie Buck seated with her mother, Emma, alongside the Lurie Institute for Disability Policy logo. Rebecca Cokley, Program Officer at the Ford Foundation.
Carrie Buck was a woman with disabilities who became pregnant and was the subject of a Supreme Court case in Buck versus Bell. And the decision was that she should be involuntarily sterilized because, in the words of Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, 3 generations of imbeciles are more than enough.
Ayesha Elaine Lewis, Senior Staff Attorney at the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund.
It talked about the fear that too many undesirable people being born would sap the strength of society. These ideas are disgusting. They were inspirational to the Nazis in Germany. And we should remember this part of our history and reckon with it fully.
A poster promoting Laura's Carrie Buck Fellowship keynote talk. Maddie Crowley, Communications Specialist at the Lurie Institute for Disability Policy. Then, audience listens to Rebecca and Laura's keynote discussion.
So the Carrie Buck Fellowship is really an opportunity for the Lurie Institute and Brandeis as a university to reconcile with some of the harms of the Buck v. Bell court decision. It was actually such a wonderful opportunity for an individual to come and educate people about people with disabilities and how that intersects with reproductive care access, reproductive justice, and things like that.
Laura speaks with ASL interpreter behind her.
We're searching for a new Carrie Buck Fellow. We're really looking for someone who brings a part of this conversation that hasn't really been heard before. Someone that really cares about both disability justice and reproductive justice. Laura brings a really interesting approach to this as a blind queer woman. She has come into this opportunity with the fellowship really bringing people to her level in a really accessible way to educate people about her experience and the experience of her community.
Laura.
For about 9 years, I didn't know that I had an entire community out there of disabled and blind people who had the same fears.
Sexual ableism is the devaluing of disabled people, especially around reproductive health or sexuality.
Many states have laws where parental disability is grounds for termination of parental rights. A map of the United States that shows termination of parental rights by state and disability type. Laura.
Seeing somebody as not sexual, it might be around reproductive health choices and removing the right to parent. It could just be not wanting to date a disabled person or thinking that a disabled person's life might be less than or inferior. The most insidious parts of sexual ableism is when we internalize the messages around it. And so I know for myself as a blind woman in my early 20s when I was first diagnosed, I had those questions: who will want to date me? Will I ever be a parent? Those questions were rooted in sexual ableism. And I just didn't have role models. I didn't know that there are hundreds and thousands of blind parents out there.
User explores interactive data set titled Who Are Disabled Parents? On the National Research Center for Parents with Disabilities website. Rebecca.
Laura's work is so incredibly exciting to me. I think the thing that stuck out the most was particularly the conversations around consent, because people don't talk to people with disabilities about consent.
Laura.
And so if we're talking about parents, teachers, or educators, that may often look like creating a classroom that is consent-centered.
Laura tabling at a conference.
That centers the child and their autonomy and their agency and starts planting those messages from a really young age. And I do work to show the parents, teachers, and educators how the way that they are modeling consent and healthy relationships will determine how those students grow up and the relationships that they go into.
Maddie.
We don't talk about disability and sexuality. We don't talk about disability and sex, at all. Laura is such a fantastic fellow because she has such an ability to connect with people and make people feel comfortable in talking about these things.
Ayesha.
People with disabilities often have higher rates of sexual abuse and exploitation. And so being able to have sex ed that teaches people about consent and how to protect themselves is even more important for people with disabilities.
Rebecca.
Laura's work fights back against the invisibility of disabled people. Being able to talk about sexual agency, being able to talk about pleasure. If we as a community claim that we want our folks to feel like they can bring their whole selves to the table, this is a really important part of it.
Sexual ableism is systemic in institutions and policies that dramatically impact people with disabilities as they try to become parents. Laura.
So I could tell you I could write a dissertation about how sexual ableism impacts disabled people as they're trying to start families, whether it's from medical devices that aren't accessible, pregnancy tests or fertility tests, ovulation kits that aren't accessible, all the way up to doctors who may not believe that disabled people should be parents.
Ayesha.
There was one case where a blind couple had a child, and at the hospital, the medical staff reported that the child wouldn't be safe because the child had blind parents. And so they weren't allowed to take their child home with them. This is not an uncommon occurrence for people with disabilities.
Maddie.
There's such a expectation to be the perfect parent. And then there's this huge other layer of what that looks like to be a perfect parent with a disability. Because a lot of people think people with disabilities aren't really capable of anything, let alone having a job, having a home, having children.
Laura.
The medical system used to practice eugenics, doing forced sterilizations, and now we really have turned to the courts to see who can be fit for parenthood.
Maddie.
More than anything, we really need to understand what parenting can look like for a person with a disability, but help providers, help social workers and other people know that, oh, this is just how this parent is parenting. It's not actually that this child is in danger. It's different, not worse.
Laura and her son walking with a cross-disability group in the Women's March. Laura.
When I'm talking to people who are newer to blindness or to youth, teens, I am letting them know this language of ableism. I think that it is important that they understand that it is systemic, that it is not them. I think it's important that if they have a negative belief or attitude or thought around blindness, that they stop and question where that came from.
Ayesha.
Participating in their community, having economic independence and freedom, people being able to make decisions about their own lives, all of that is the world that Carrie Buck deserved.
A selfie of Laura and her son smiling.
To be able to raise their children and share the love that they have in their hearts with the people they care about.
Laura and her son sit together with her retired black lab guide dog beside them.
Carrie Buck deserves so much more. We owe it to their memory to create a better world where people with and without disabilities are able to thrive, to choose for themselves, and to live the fullest life that they want to live.
Laura.
I've been blind for 21 years, and for the first 13 of those years, I wanted nothing to do with the blind community. What I didn't realize was that was internalized ableism, that I had adopted those messages of blindness being a bad thing or something to be pitied.
People with varying disabilities at the Women's March in Oakland. They hold a banner that reads, "The American Dream Must Be Accessible." Then, Laura walking with her guide dog at Pride Parade, holding a sign that says "Blind and Proud." Then, a group of blind people at San Francisco Pride holding colorful handmade signs including "Blind and Proud," "Perky, Resilient, Involved, Determined, Excited, Blind," and "Blind, Proud."
But what I found when I came to community, when I learned the language of ableism, and when I certainly started to learn the language of sexual ableism, was that it wasn't me. It was society, it was systemic, and it was something that then I had a roadmap to change.